Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Oh, the fun, the insanity, the craziness. Oh, the conservatives. Oh, the Trumpkins, the Josh Hawleys of the world. First thing I saw today was from Josh Hawley. Senator from Missouri says, store shelves are empty, prices are soaring, real wages declining, American cities are engulfed in violence, borders controlled by cartels, and parents are treated as terrorists, while actual terrorists go free. When do Dems seriously consider the 25th Amendment? 25th Amendment already? Wow. And I'm going, I'm sorry. I was just at the supermarket. Shelves. I remember empty shelves. I do. I remember walking into the supermarket during the last guy's term, and the shelves actually being seriously empty. This inflation that's happening, a lot to do with the last guy. So it's amazing how the hate machine, the grievance candy folks, they're throwing this all on the feet of Joe Biden. And you go, wait a second. Hold on there, Joshy. What are you doing about it? And the answer is, well, this is the world that they want. This is the world that conservatives, they thrive in. Because this is the fear world. They can scare people. Oh, inflation's going to destroy you. Wages are declining. And you go, wait a second, no, the wages are actually going up. In fact, a lot of workers are exercising power they haven't had or haven't felt in decades. Wages are going up, and hopefully they continue to go up as we continue to organize. Very, very bizarre. And all of this is coming out of the fact that Joe Biden held a press conference today. Now, look, I'll be the first one to tell you, I don't think Joe Biden does a very good job of being a public speaker. He's an older guy. He's got a stutter. There's a lot there. Do I think he's senile? No, but that didn't stop the conservative media from going after him, or the entire right-wingosphere of hate mongers and outrage candy addicts. They got their 1,500 tweets of 25th Amendment, and they got it trending. And, I'm looking at this and I'm going, I do remember, and come with me if you will, go the way back machine. I watched the press conference. I didn't hear a lie from Joe Biden about the 2020 election. There was no grievance. There was no someone cheated. There was nothing made up. I didn't hear him praise Vladimir Putin. Didn't hear any of that. In fact, was I think spot on what needs to be done. Didn't come up with an idea of drinking bleach or shoving a light up your behind or drinking pee or any, none of these bizarre claims that there's a miracle cure for COVID. Didn't insult anyone. It's just, wow. I got to be honest. I was like, wow, this is why we voted for Joe Biden. That's right. I now remember, because the last guy was horrible and all over the place. The attention span of a gnat. So to attack Joe Biden because he has a stutter, and this isn't his thing. He was never going to be Bill Clinton. He was never going to be Barack Obama. He wasn't, and never expected him to be that. What's infuriating to me is you have a political party. You have the entire Republican Party, and I'm going to go the entire party, who want, with the exception of maybe Liz Cheney and maybe Adam Kinzinger, who want Joe Biden to fail. They didn't do what they had done to Barack Obama and come out and say it, because they now have an entire cable news network who willing to do that. And Biden was rightfully so, pointing out the fact that he doesn't know what the Republican agenda is. What are they bringing to the table? He said the American public is outraged about the tax structure we have in America. What are they proposing to do about it? Have you heard anything? And the answer is no. Biden went on to say, I don't anticipate that there'd be such a stalwart. I did not anticipate that there'd be such a stalwart effort to make sure that the most important thing was that President Biden didn't get anything done. He said, think about this. What are Republicans for? What are they for? Name me one thing. And now here's the thing. I've been asking that question now. Let's see. Check the watch. Right around 16 years now. I've been asking that exact question. What do they stand for that will help working people? Answer: nothing. If you're talking about helping the real welfare queens, the folks at the very top, our billionaire class, well, they've got ideas: more tax cuts, more deregulation, less ability for working people to, well, solve our needs and our wants and our problems. And perfect example, January 15th, just days ago, that $250 check that was going out to families with children that we now know cut childhood poverty in half didn't go out. And it didn't go out because, well, you got a couple of Democrats, too, and 50 Republicans who are dead set against helping those families. And now you've got some 4 million kids who could fall into poverty this month, because that monthly child tax credit payment not going to be there. And you go, remember party, family values? Remember them? I know. The preborn, love the preborn. After they're out breathing air on your own. And this is what's frustrating in all of this. And this is what's frustrating to Biden. Now, I'll be honest. I look at President Biden's statement of, he didn't anticipate. You should have, because you lived through 8 years with Barack Obama where that's all they did was try to stop any bit of progress going forward, where all they did was gridlock, delay, and don't you remember those wonderful ticking bomb scenarios on the debt ceiling, where we're going to go right down to the last second before we increase the debt ceiling, and the globe is worried about if we're going to go into an economic meltdown and fall into the economic abyss. Remember how wonderful that was, and how they always had to get their pound of flesh. They always had to get their ideological victory. Remember the screw-quester? Oh, how wonderful those days were. Those Republicans were good, God-fearing Americans compared to the ones we have now, who it's all about getting a headline. It's all about getting their donors to get their attention, to kiss up to King Trump. And of course, Trump couldn't go the day without immediately rushing somewhere to do a podcast or something. He went on and said, Joe Biden was just getting softball questions from a pre-chosen list of reporters. Here's the weird thing. Biden did call on and answer questions from the Fox News and the Newsmax. And what did they come up with? Stupidity. Peter Ducey, the guy from Fox, he said, why are you trying so hard in your first year to pull the country so far left? And you go, wait a second. I mean, that's one of those questions where if you're sitting next to him, you just smack them. No, you can't do that. The power of the press. Now, Biden said, I'm not. He said, you guys have been trying to convince me that I'm Bernie Sanders. I'm not. I like him. I'm not Bernie Sanders. I'm not a socialist. He says, I'm a mainstream Democrat. He got what he wanted. Ducey got what he wanted. He got him explaining. But here's the thing. I don't care what you call yourself, socialist, mainstream Democrat, conservative. I don't care what you call yourself. The fact that some 4 million kids are now going to go back into poverty because, well, we've got this whatever political divide going on. Look, have your little fight. Go in the cloakroom and do what you got to do. But at the end of the day, there are 4 million kids going to go to bed hungry. Let that sink in for a minute. And this is where the politics stops at the river's edge. This is where you go, real lives are at stake. But no, it's all about getting the clicks, especially on social media. It's all about the clicks. It's all about, getting people to jump on board. The guy from, what was it, Newsmax, basically asking him if he's senile. Now, if it's me, I just keep making him ask the question again and again, cite the poll again and again and again, just to keep him talking and saying the same dumb stuff, and see how long you can run him around the yard before you go, are you senile? You keep asking the same dumb question. But I look at this news conference and look, if I'm one of his handlers, I don't put him out there. Take the heat for not having press conference. Don't care if I'm one of his handlers, because this isn't his forum. Policy, that's where he's strongest at. And what's going to happen is Democrats had better get their stuff together, because what today for me was the end of the agenda. The reality that Joe Manchin is not going to move anywhere near helping push an agenda forward. What the Biden administration has gotten policy-wise, that's what they're going to have to take into the midterm. Are there things now that they can start looking to maybe try and pass? Little things that are going to, but the big, bold, visionary stuff, those are done. Voting rights is done. At this point, spend your money, spend your time, energy, get out and get people registered to vote, and try and figure out how in those, 15, 16 states that have changed voting laws, that you can overcome the obstacles that they've put in the way. It's really about how are you going to save something in these midterm elections. Because congratulations, the Republicans did what they were supposed to do. They blocked everything. They got a lot of help from Joe Manchin and Senator Dipsy Doo there from Arizona. A lot of help. Without those things that are going to make people's lives better, I don't know what Democrats are going to be able to take into the midterms, because understand, people have already forgotten about the rescue plan. Maybe the infrastructure bill, as more jobs are created here in the spring, and that picks up, maybe that helps. But people want to know, I don't care what you did for me yesterday. What are you doing for me today? What have you done for me lately? And that's where the Democrats had better figure this stuff out and quickly. And out of this press conference, that was part of it for me. Where do they go? And even some of the Democratic pundits, the big name folks are saying, you better figure something out. Now, some interesting news. The Supreme Court, our Supreme Court, they decided that Trump's request to shield documents from the January 6th committee, not gonna block it. Of the 9 robe wearers, 8 of them said that the January 6th committee could see the documents. Only 1, and curious that only Clarence Thomas would have granted Trump's request to block the documents from being seen. And you go, gee, I wonder why. Would it have anything to do with his wife, Jennewein? Would it have anything for her, being a Tea Party person, one of the big wigs there? Would it have anything to do with a lot of the circles that he runs in? Would it be that maybe the wife's name's tied up in a lot of this stuff? I don't know. We will find out. And how much of his name is tied up in this? Going to be interesting to find out. Now, Steve Bannon in the news, along with Boris Epshteyn. Both of them subpoenaed. Boris just subpoenaed this week. They have taken a strategic ownership position in this new crypto coin. Evidently, cryptocurrency the way to go. Everyone's on board. Not me. I still see it as a Ponzi scheme, but that's why I'll probably still be poor if it does work out. But they've got a strategic ownership position in the $FJB, and you know what it stands for. they're now heavily selling it to the faithful, to the MAGA hat wearers, to the Q kooks, to the Trump fans. And look, they're saying, look, Trump fanatics, let your feelings, your primal disapproval, your primal disgust with Joe Biden be heard by our token, by our non-fungible token. Then give us the money, and this way we can become very rich. And this really is what the Republicans believe in. It really is all about the grift, man. It's all about how can we rip people off? How much money can we make off of it? And how can we flee? What's it saying? A fool and his money soon separated. There it is, right there. And on that vein as well, you have Roger Marshall, the senator from Kansas, who is now selling moron T-shirts after Dr. Anthony Fauci basically called him a moron. He's now proud of the fact that someone thinks he's a moron. Yeah. Welcome to America. Now remember, he is supposed to be one of our best and brightest. He's a sitting U.S. senator selling moron T-shirts. Where else do you go with that? Now, the reality is, there's one guy who gets it right in my world, and that's Sherrod Brown. And the fact of the matter is the Biden agenda's stopped. I don't see anything going forward. I'm quite distraught over that. Voting rights, something that has to be done. But as Sherrod Brown said today, he said, we know why the corporate elite in Congress and in legislatures all over the country don't want everyone to vote, their vote to count. Because the voting booth is where workers go to hold the wealthy and the powerful accountable. And if there's any message I want out of today, it's that one. And for me, that's the message that should be hammered at every turn. Yeah, I thought Joe Biden did all right on the press conference. They did what I expected. But the message, people aren't going to get the vote. And the wealthy and the powerful, they're going to benefit. That's the message. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1909. That was the day Lewis Hine photographed child workers standing on spinning frames to mend threads and replace empty bobbins at the Bib Mill No. 1 in Macon, Georgia. It was just one example of the appalling use of children in industrial labor. Hine built his career on photographic portraits of young miners and mill workers, child cotton pickers, and factory workers. In 1908, he was hired by the National Child Labor Committee to document child laborers across the country. For the next 15 years, Hine would contribute over 5,000 photographs to the cause of ending child labor. Photo historian Dale Kaplan described the ways in which Hine captured these images, writing, Hine, the gentleman actor and mimic, assumed a variety of personas, including Bible salesman, postcard salesman, and industrial photographer, making a record of factory machinery to gain entry into the workplace. When unable to deflect his confrontations with management, he simply waited outside the canning lines, factories, farms, and sweatshops with his 50 pounds of photographs.
Time for the Rick Smith Show.
Children as they entered and exited the workplace.
Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
On particular industries and locations. The NCLC also used the photographs to illustrate its own publication and succeeded in placing them in newspapers, progressive publications,
brothers, sisters,
one
working
NCLC
class
poster
heroes.
that featured Hine's
This
portrait
is the
read,
Rick Smith Show.
Making human
Thanks
junk.
so
Shall
much
industry
for
be
being
allowed
here
to
today
put
on the big
these
program.
costs on
Lots to
society?
get
By
to,
1912,
lots to talk
the
about.
NCLC persuaded
Let's
Congress
start
to
off with the
create
negatives.
United
Tomorrow,
States
last day for
Children's
open
Bureau.
enrollment
The two
for health
organizations
insurance.
worked
If you don't
together
have it,
to
you're in a state
investigate abuses
where
of
your
child
governor
labor.
isn't insane,
Years of legislative
where
and
your
judicial
state
battles
government
followed,
isn't
until
lost,
finally,
hasn't lost
in
their mind,
1938,
and has
Congress
expanded
passed the Fair
Medicaid
Labor
to
Standards
ensure
Act.
that the good folks of your state
can get health insurance. Healthcare.gov.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
January 15th, the last day for open enrollment. Highly suggest, if you don't have it, get it. Also, tomorrow the 15th, welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Coming check out our website, for the child tax credit. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me. Where are the statesmen on the other side? Where are the people who are going to step forward and actually attempt to solve some of our problems? It's crazy to me. And I keep hearing people say, oh, inflation. And the most crazy argument of inflation, it's the tariffs. Joe Biden needs to undo all of the tariffs, which is weird because I'm hearing it from MAGA people. I'm hearing it from Trump supporters. These are Trump's tariffs. That's the crazy part of this. And here to share some thoughts on just maybe how crazy all of this is and maybe where the inflation is coming from and maybe, what we do on the trade front. I've asked Rob Scott to come talk with us. Rob's an economist over at the Economic Policy Institute. He's got a piece out over at the Hill. Trump's tariffs are not causing post-COVID inflation. Rob, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So I'll tell you, I've had a couple of Trump supporters actually say to me that Biden's tariffs are harming the country and causing inflation. And I can do nothing but sit in shock at the ridiculousness of the statement and maybe the amnesic mentality of some, but that's not really causing it either, is it?
No, it's not. This inflation is really entirely predictable. It was caused by the COVID crisis. We ran out of everything, literally. The factories shut down. And so, of course, when we tried to restart the economy, we ran into all sorts of bottlenecks, and it's been exacerbated by the fact that over the last 2 decades we've become incredibly dependent on imports for much of the manufactured goods that we consume, and we of course especially needed manufacturers during the recovery from the COVID crisis. We needed all those PPEs and other materials that we were importing from abroad to protect ourselves from the virus. So it's really all about how the economy has changed, about our growing dependence on imports. The tariffs have helped, but it's just a small step in the right direction.
No, and as I said I said last night when I talked to my good friend Scott Paul from the Alliance for American Manufacturing, when Trump came out with the tariffs, I was going, I've been calling for him for years. This is a step, I think, in the right direction. I wanted him to go to China and get a good deal. I wanted him to be the person he said he was, Mr. Art of the Deal. I wanted him to come back with the best, most tremendous, most incredible, bestest deal ever made. He didn't. And we're suffering for that in this moment, and it's not just him. It was Obama's era, it was Bush's era, and it was Clinton's era that put us in this mess. And now we've got to clean it up.
Absolutely, this is a bipartisan disaster. It's been brewing for decades. As I said, both parties have cut these trade and investment deals, starting with NAFTA. And leading, of course, to China's entry into the World Trade Organization. Those deals paved the way for outsourcing and for increased reliance on imports. We've lost 70,000 factories by the latest census data, and of course, more than 5 million manufacturing jobs as a result of this growing dependence on imports and our yawning trade deficits. That's what's really destroying jobs and destroying manufacturing communities around the country.
Say that again, 70,000 factories?
Exactly. And I think that's really the tip of the iceberg, because not only have we lost factories here, but manufacturers like, for example, Apple and many others have chosen to build their factories abroad rather than building them at home. So those are potential jobs that are lost as well. Millions and millions of those jobs that went to China, Korea, and Japan, but of course also Europe as well. So they're all stealing our best manufacturing jobs.
And at some point you're going to have, for me, I look at the pandemic where I think we finally realized that our supply chains are too weak. I think we've realized that we've become too dependent, or at least I hope we've realized that we've become too dependent on China and the rest of the world. And you would think in this moment, and this is why I think, Biden's press conference today and the response from it, extremely polarized is troubling, because this is one of those things that I think could unite the country and say, look, we lived through the pandemic when shelves were truly empty. We lived through the pandemic where we couldn't get PPE and we couldn't get the things we need. This seems like an issue that could unite the country around the idea of, yeah, let's rebuild our manufacturing prowess. Let's be the world's manufacturer again. But there doesn't seem to be that. Maybe from Sherrod Brown, but from nobody else.
No, I think that's right. I haven't seen the leadership on the Hill or frankly in the White House on these issues yet. Biden campaigned about rebuilding the American economy, about leading a set of programs that were going to be even larger than those generated by Theodore Roosevelt, but Franklin Delano Roosevelt, but that just hasn't happened. And a big reason for that is Congress. Congress has gotten in the way. They're refusing to approve a Build Back Better program that we desperately need. But frankly, I think Biden has many tools that he could use himself through executive action that could begin to reduce our trade deficits. He hasn't listened to his inner demons in Wall Street in whispering, cut tariffs. But he needs to, I think, get more aggressive and take actions to shrink our dependence on imported commodities. And to me, the best single thing he could do would be to take action to lower the value of the U.S. dollar. It's become overvalued, mostly because of foreign government intervention, again, over the past 2 decades. But part of it has to do with markets as well. We can tame both of those, and it can be done through administrative action. He doesn't need Congress to do this.
So now, if this happens, does this make inflation concerns better? Does it make it worse? How does the Fed play in this? Because the fear is the Fed's going to slam on the brakes and interest rates are going to go up and all kinds of things are going to happen. Good or bad, whichever side of the equation you're on. Would this help any of that?
It's gonna make for a difficult transition, but I think we have to realize it's not that difficult. What would happen, I think, is that the cost of borrowing would go up slightly. We're talking about maybe a few tenths of a percentage point. That's really noise in financial markets. Over the past year, the cost of borrowing of money to build a house has gone up over a percentage point. The economy hasn't collapsed over that. We're much more worried about a few ticks on the inflation rate than we are about the home mortgage rate. So that's all it would be, and it would probably only last a few years. Likewise, there'd be a one-time, I think, uptick in the cost of imported goods, but imports don't translate directly into higher consumer prices. Even though we consume a lot of imports, it's still only about 10% of what we buy as consumers overall in this market. So the effect on inflation will be muted, and the effect on jobs, I think, would be much more important. We'd create more good jobs at high wages with excellent benefits in manufacturing. So when you add up the pluses and the minuses, I think the pluses far outweigh the costs of this kind of a move.
Now, but in any situation, there are going to be winners and losers, and if working people are winning, someone's got to take it on the chin. Who is that? I would argue it's probably the folks who did really well during the pandemic, our billionaire class, the folks that saw their wealth, at least the top 10 of them, according to Oxfam, saw their wealth double over the course of the pandemic. Would it be them? Who's the loser in this? Because we're being fed that it's we the consumers, because consumers are hurt by this. If we can't get cheap stuff from China, Rob, what are we going to do?
Well, we're going to get stuff at home, and we're going to have better wages. We have more jobs making that stuff here at home. I think the cost will come out of the pocket of Wall Street. Wall Street has gotten incredibly wealthy as a result of the offshoring hyper-globalization we've gone through in the last two decades. So, I think it would put a dent into the stock market. Frankly, it might hurt those of us with retirement plans a bit. But again, over the long haul, the market's delivered just high rates of return over decades. So this is not going to destroy markets for average investors either. It's just those at the very top, the people that are making money buying and selling multinational businesses and putting workers out of a job by closing down factories and sending them abroad.
Now, in looking at the tariffs, again, back to the tariff issue, because
exactly,
there are some folks who go, well, we should get rid of them because, cheaper stuff and all that. Your argument is that if we get rid of the tariffs, we're going to actually make our supply chain problems probably much more difficult, especially on the PPE front. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right. And I've looked at a couple tariffs in particular. I've done a lot of work over years on steel and aluminum. I've consulted with the domestic industry in trade cases, two-hander. But the reality is that these tariffs have helped create jobs in those two industries, and they didn't have a big impact on prices of either of those commodities. In the long term, prices bumped up for a year or so, and those price effects went away. In the case of aluminum, for example, as I say in the op-ed, the aluminum tariffs resulted in about 55 new investments that we can identify, over $6 billion of new investment, about 6,000 jobs have been created. So those kinds of benefits, we saw the same thing in steel as well, dozens of new investments, billions of dollars, thousands of new jobs created. If we take away the tariffs, those benefits will be lost. And I think that the same effect is going to show up in, for example, as you say, PPE. The broad tariffs on China that were imposed by Trump in 2018 forced firms to diversify. They're making more goods here in the United States. They're making more closer to home in places like Mexico. It's not great for American workers, but it's a step in the right direction.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show here with Rob Scott. Rob's an economist with the Economic Policy Institute, EPI. .org, their website. You can check out the work that they do. We'll get links out on social media. He's got a piece out just on this topic as we're talking about, in addition to the piece over at The Hill, and we'll get links out on both of those. Now, you said a second ago that the cost of aluminum bumped up a little bit and then eventually went away. We're looking at price inflation right now. Everyone's hair on fire because politically the Republicans are getting a lot of hay out of this, saying, see, everything Joe Biden does is making it more expensive for you. And they're using this inflation, and I don't believe they have any interest in doing anything to help alleviate it because it is such a good political attack tool. Is this inflation going to, as you said, bump up and then eventually go away, or is this something we're going to deal with for a long period of time, do you think?
This is a temporary bump. This is a short-term problem caused by shortages of supplies, by factories that weren't operating, again, by our overdependence on imports. Well, we can reduce that dependence. We can make more goods at home. It's going to be profitable for domestic manufacturers to do that because prices have soared so high. And we've seen this many times over the past few decades. I started my career working on energy policy. We've seen huge price spikes in oil. We've seen embargoes dating back to 1973. Every time you had prices go through the roof, that created incentives for more oil exploration, and oil supplies came forward from not just from the OPEC countries, but here in the United States. We become almost oil dependent because of those prices. So, the magic of the market works. People respond, and investors invest. And I think we'll see the same thing here. And most economists predict that by the end of 2022, inflation will be back down in the neighborhood of 3% in the United States. So we're at the peak right now. Inflation is going to tamp down. But by the same token, wage increases have perked up, at least in nominal terms, in paycheck terms. And so far, inflation is growing a little faster, so workers have fallen a bit behind. But those rates of wage increase are likely to persist because we now got tight labor markets, thanks to the 6 million plus jobs that were created by the Biden administration economic policies. So yes, inflation is biting right now. That bite's going to shrink, and yet wages are going to continue to grow.
But those 6 million jobs don't matter, Rob, because Joe Biden doesn't know how to create jobs.
Exactly.
Look, and I don't give presidents credit for job creation at all. But if that's the metrics that we're going to go by, that jobs created during a president's term is what he gets credit for, then he's been the greatest job creator ever.
He has, and it is in part he should get the credit for it, because he worked with Congress the first 90 days or 100 days in office to pass the American Recovery Plan, which injected almost $1 trillion into the economy. They passed the infrastructure bill, another $500 billion. That is contributing to the recovery that we have right now. And frankly, the other thing that he's done is that he's gotten almost 3/4 of the population vaccinated, and that's making it possible for people to go safely back to work. So all of those things have contributed to the recovery, and I think it will get much better on both fronts in 2022.
So last question I've got for you, clearly the message that I want to send, hair's not on fire. The end of the world isn't coming.
No.
We're not living in the store. The shelves are empty. Cities are burning kind of world that the Josh Hawleys of the world are trying to convince us it is. Things are a little rough right now, but hair not on fire.
No, not at all. And even if you waved one, took all these tariffs away, it would only make a tiny dent in inflation for a couple of months, and then we're still going to be left with the same inflation until markets take their course, and inflation naturally fades away over the next year or two.
Yeah, we got lots of work to do, and undoing the one good thing I think Trump actually did is probably not the smartest thing to do. But Rob, I appreciate the time and the work that you do. Hope you'll come back and talk to us again real soon.
Happy to. Thank you for having me.
Good stuff, Rob Scott, economist at the Economic Policy Institute. Check out his work, epi.org. He's also got a link. He's got a story over at The Hill. We'll get links out on social media. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1915. That was the day that 2 striking workers were shot and killed by gunmen hired by a fertilizer plant in New Jersey. In addition to the 2 killed, many more were beaten and injured by the hired guns. The workers were represented by the Chemical Workers Union. They had gone on strike after their wages were arbitrarily slashed by the company. That past October, their pay was cut from $2 a day to $1.60. The company promised to end the 20% cut in the new year, but January came and the massive wage cuts were not restored. Fed up, the men called for a strike on January 3rd. And on this fateful day of the shooting, strikers believed that a train coming in from New York was going to deliver strike breakers to the plant. 200 of the strikers came out to meet the train. According to a police officer on the scene, some strikers peacefully boarded the train to check for replacement workers. They found none. But then armed detectives hired by the company rushed out of the plant. They shot indiscriminately into the crowd of unarmed strikers. One of the 2 men killed was said to have had 6 bullets in his body. The policeman who observed the violence recalled, "It's impossible to describe how those unarmed, defenseless men were shot down. Some ran and escaped injury. Those who were unable to get to high ground made for the swamps. And it was those men that were shot, beaten, and then shot again." 31 of the hired guns were arrested. 9 were found guilty of manslaughter. The strikers returned to work at a new daily wage of $1.80 an hour. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
As Rob Scott was talking about, one of the really good things that the Biden administration was able to get through was the infrastructure bill. That's going to create millions of jobs across the country, and good paying jobs. The kind of jobs that you support a family on, that you don't have to worry about, are your kids going to be able to eat? You know they're going to. And a lot of those jobs are going to not be the kind that you got to spend years in college taking on a lifetime of student loan debt. They're the kind where you can run through an apprenticeship program, a good union apprenticeship program, not only not take on debt, but actually get paid while you learn a skill, a craft, a trade, and help rebuild our country. I mean, we're in that kind of moment that I think is really, really important, which is why for the next several months, we're going to be reaching out to our friends in the building trades to talk about the incredible work that they do in training America's workforce and training the people who are going to rebuild our nation and what we're going to pass on to our children and our grandchildren. That's why I've asked Brian Jennewein to come talk with us. Brian is an Administrative District Council of Eastern Missouri Director. He's the chief cook and bottle washer there. Their website, BACSTL.com. We'll get that out on social media. You can take a look at it. Brian, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, good evening, and glad to be with you, Rick.
Now, like I said, I think the administration coming forward, getting this infrastructure bill, going to be extremely important for our country because we need to rebuild our infrastructure. The American Society of Civil Engineers say we need about $4.8 trillion. This was about 1.2. Lots of work to do, but this is a good start, and it's going to help your members and your future members, the folks that, like my kids, who may be able to get those jobs down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we sit today, we all know that the manpower shortage across the country, it's facing all industries. So with that infrastructure bill, hopefully passing here at some point, that's going to make this our jobs all that much more important. Getting out and organizing people and trying to get them into the trades. Obviously, that starts with our apprenticeship programs.
Now, you're probably my age, maybe a little bit younger. When I was in high school back in the mid '80s, we were told everyone's got to go to college. Everyone, in order to get into the middle class, everyone's got to go to college, and they really de-emphasized vocational education and actually doing work. We're now coming back to the realization that we kind of need people who can do actual work, who can take something and build something, which is why I think there's a really good push at saying, look, we need to re-emphasize people who have the skills of your members to be able to do the work that needs to be done. So when I bring folks on you like you on the program, the apprenticeship programs, as a parent, so appealing because my kids aren't going to go into a lifetime of student loan debt, and at the end of the day, I might actually get somebody who can redo my chimney.
That's exactly right. With the apprenticeship programs, everybody knows you enter these programs, you're getting paid on day one. You're accruing benefits. You're working towards a future, and you're not burying yourself into student debt. There's nothing wrong with the college education. But like you said, in the past, I can speak for myself in school, there was no guidance counselor coming to me explaining the building trades to me or anything of the such. So
how did you get into it? How did Brian find his way into the Bricklayers Union?
Well, I guess I would say I was more or less born into it, as some are, I guess. My great-grandfather was a stonemason, grandfather bricklayer, father bricklayer. My son, he recently completed his apprenticeship, so he's going to be the fifth generation of our family in the trade. Really didn't know anything other than that. I wanted to be like everybody else. I wanted to go be a football player, but that didn't work out so well. So.
Don't we all? Didn't we all? But here's the important part, and I've heard so many incredible stories from the IBEW guy who came out of prison to getting a job as an electrician, making $100,000 a year, living the American dream. From the guy living in his car and it happened to be sleeping in a parking lot of a union, where the guy said, hey, or the painters union said, hey, we're going to teach you how to be a glazer. And he was able to become then a trainer. There are all these great stories out there. And you guys got a bunch of them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to coming out of the recession under President Bolin, we began, our main mission was organizing. Organize. That's what's been burnt into us. Coming out of that, we lost so many members like everybody. So our main focus is organizing. So we go out and we're trying to get the guys, the people that are unrepresented, maybe being taken advantage of those. And we've been fortunate enough to get several people from the other side of the sector, the non-union sector, that we're being taken advantage of and get them on this side. Once we're able to explain the benefits of being a union member, and they've got a voice, they have the comfort of having someone that represents them. And once they understand the benefits they're working towards, their futures become that much brighter.
Walk me through that. Walk me through that process. How's my life going to get better if I'm a union member?
Yeah, absolutely, Rick. So on day one, I would take my time and try to get to know you a little bit. I would want to get to know you and create a relationship with you. Trust is everything. Just walking up with a bunch of paperwork explaining benefits, that doesn't usually go anywhere. So you've got to create a relationship and earn that trust between the people. Once we're able to do that, we can sit down and we can go over the benefits that we provide, such as healthcare. Today in the pandemic, with COVID, that's front and center now more than ever, probably. And we're fortunate here that we have a clinic we can provide on site to our members on day one. The day they become a member, that's there for them. But along with your healthcare, your accruing benefits such as your pension benefits, ongoing education. That education leads to other opportunities in the trade. Maybe you put the tools down at some point and you further yourself. Maybe you're an estimator, a superintendent. You could be a business agent. You could be the director. And we sit down and we interview all incoming apprentice, all first term apprentice. And that's usually how I end the conversation with them is that, look, you're here today. I was there at one time. That's the first step. And, it's like anything you're getting into. It can seem rough at times, but you've got to look down the road. And one day you can have my job. You can go anywhere you want in this industry. The tools are not necessarily the end of it.
Yeah.
But the benefits, that's what we all work for. We want to retire in dignity. You look at retirement. You hear it said a lot that that's going to be our next big crisis coming. The people that are sitting out there that are believing that their 401ks are going to sustain them, you've got to understand that you're going to need $1 million, maybe more, to get you through life expectancy from 62 to 78, right? If you're a male. So the unfortunate side of that is most people today are sitting, if that's what they're based on, they're sitting with maybe 200 grand, maybe a little more. I think the average is around 215. So that's not going to sustain you. Our members, once they come into the trades and they're able to do their time, they get to that day when they get to hang it up and retire. They get to retire in dignity.
For me, look, I've been a Teamster for over 30 years. The reality is it's about earning a decent wage. It's about having health security during my working years and retirement security at the end of it. And having, and even beyond that, the empowerment that comes with having a voice and the ability to dictate some of my own conditions. Safety being an enormous part of this, especially in the building trades. I mean, I talk to so many people around the country who say, if there were a union here, things would be safer. Or if there weren't a union here, things would be much less safe. And for me, I always come back to the saying that every CEO in this country has a contract. Every worker should as well. And this is a part of that. But beyond that, I come back to the apprenticeship part of it. And I wanted to focus a little bit on that because I want people to believe that becoming a bricklayer and doing the work that you do is not something that they should look down on their children for. We've been trained as adults, as parents, to think if someone actually works for a living, that there's something wrong with that. And I don't believe there is. I believe every job is worthy of dignity. I believe every job is worthy of respect. And part of that comes in the wages, hours, conditions that they're able to achieve while they're working. And when you're bringing people in, when you're organizing members and you're training new people, I think that instilling those values is a part of the whole equation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Unionism, you preach that from day one. We're all one, right? So one voice. We sit down and negotiate, as one. We're not broke up. We're not pitted against each other. The training aspect of it, when guys, well, people in general, when they come into any of the trades, when they come in, there's so many different aspects of the unionized industry, I think, that overwhelms young people. I speak for myself, and I can see it my own kid. Coming in, you're young, you don't so much care about your health care. You think you're invincible. You don't care about a pension. You don't believe, you're not looking that far down the road, or furthering your education or anything of such. But all of those little pieces all come together as you tread and you make your way through your career. But getting that opportunity, that's the beginning of it. Opening the door for someone and giving them that opportunity, that's where it all begins. Once you can open that door, lives change. And that, to me, that's the most rewarding part of my job, is seeing lives change.
And I've heard those stories, Brian, and they're incredible.
Yeah.
You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Brian Jennewein. Brian is the Administrative District Council of Eastern Missouri's director. Their website, bacstl.com. You can also take a look at the International Union of Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers Union at bacweb.org. Of course, we will get links out on social media on how you can do that. Now, I'm somebody who, when I was a kid, I didn't have the ability. I didn't have 5 generations of parents and grandparents and great-grandparents who were able to bring me along. I was raised by a single mother in a housing project. I barely know which side of the brick is flat. And there are a lot of people who are like that. And you take people who may not even know what a brick really is and train them to be master bricklayers, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And not just our trade, but all trades. I think once you learn that trade and that's in you, it's something you can't get. You can never get that out of your system. It's a very rewarding industry, very rewarding trade. It's very physical trade, takes a toll on your body. We do have work rules in place to protect our members. But yeah, it's very, very rewarding. And the generational members, I guess you would call it, Rick, those are far, we don't see that very much anymore today. Like you said, most of the people years ago, like I said, I speak for myself, being in school, I had counselors that were constantly preaching college to me. And that's what most people were beat with, the college, which is fine. But I was never told of a skilled trade.
I go back to my grandfather. Told me if he was a truck driver. He said, if you turn out to be a truck driver, you're going to be a failure. And I have done wildly well being a truck driver and doing all kinds of other things because of my union and the contract that I worked under. And I think back to that moment. I think a lot of union members, and I think the same way about my own kids. I want them to do better than I've done, even though I think I've done pretty well. I want them to work less hard than I've had to work. I want them to have better. And I think that's naturally ingrained in parents to think that way. But to say, look, that there is a solid career to be had and a satisfying career to be had in building things. I mean, I have some building trade friends who take me around cities, Harrisburg, Philadelphia, wherever, Cleveland, and they'll go, hey, I built that. Hey, I did this. Hey, I did that. And that's going to live on for, well on into the future. In fact, I think back to my great-grandfather who laid the bricks down Berea, one of the roads in Berea, that my grandparents, as we'd go by, hey, your great-grandfather laid those bricks. That's something.
Yeah. That's, I listened to my dad do that as a kid growing up. I know I did that with my kids. And then when my son did that to me, it hit home more than ever. And I got a pretty good laugh out of it. But my parents, it was a single income. It was my father's income as a union bricklayer. He raised 6 kids on that income, put us through public school, and every one of us had every opportunity we've ever wanted. And, when you can explain that and you can, we attend a lot of job fairs at all levels, at junior highs, high schools, tech schools, VOTech. And when you can sit down and explain where you come from and explain to them that, look, here's where we're at today. This is what I've made of myself. You can do the same thing. And the average student loan debt is, I think it hovers around 50 grand. And in a lot of cases, you look 20 years down the road, once that graduate has got out of college, and they still owe $20,000+, 20 years later. You come into this, you earn what you learn, any skilled trade. And that's the value of it. That's the real value. On day one, you're providing, whether it's for yourself, your family, and you're working towards those benefits further down the road.
Yeah. No, I've told my son's not sure what he wants to do if he goes to college. And I said, find a building trade, become an electrician. And if in a couple of years you go through the apprenticeship program, you become a journeyman, you get your papers, you get all that stuff, and you go, I don't want to do this forever, then you can go to college and you've always got something, a skill to fall back on as well. Or you might find out, you absolutely love it. And like some of my Sparky friends, and they never want to leave.
Yeah, that couldn't be more right. If you get into that trade, if you're not a young person's not sure what they want to do with their life, look up a skilled trade. Look a trade up and give it a shot. There's no harm if you get halfway through that apprenticeship program and you decide you want to go to college or do anything else, you're not in debt. If you get out of your time, you finish your apprenticeship program and now you've got that journey person card. That's for life. That's for life, and you're not in debt. You can do anything with your life you want. That is the great thing about what we do in these trades and in all the skilled trades.
And the most important thing you're going to learn, you're probably never going to go hungry.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right.
Because it's always a skill someone's going to need. And my son learned a little bit about bricklaying, last summer as we laid some bricks in our patio, trying to rebuild a retaining wall. He got to play around with one of the backhoes, and that's the thing now. Real quick, 15 seconds. How do we sign up? How do we find out information? How do we get to that?
You could go to our website. All the information is on our website, BACSTL. You could go to our international union's website. That information is readily available across the country and Canada.
Good stuff, Brian. I appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rick.
Good stuff. Brian Jennewein, ADC, Council of Eastern Missouri Director. Check out the website, bacweb.org. We'll get links out on social media. Quick break, right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1920. 3,000 members of the Filipino Labor Union went on strike against the Hawaiian Sugar Planters Association on the island of Oahu. Plantation bosses intentionally recruited Filipino workers in an effort to weaken the Japanese labor force on the island. The bosses pitted one group as strike breakers against the other. The Filipino workers were paid 30 cents less each day than the Japanese workers, in a blatant effort by the plantation owners to sow inter-ethnic disharmony among the employees. The workers also had to purchase goods at extremely high prices from the company stores. Filipino-born Pablo Manlepit, trained as an attorney, became a vocal organizer with the workers. He helped lead the strike, which called for an 8-hour workday and a pay increase. The Japanese Federation of Labor quickly joined the strike, increasing the strikers' numbers to more than 8,000. Portuguese, Chinese, Puerto Rican, Spanish, Mexican, and Korean workers all took part in the fight for better wages, hours, and conditions. The plantation bosses' strategy of intentionally creating ethnic tension had failed, and 75% of the sugar workforce on the island of Oahu participated in the strike. The action cost plantation bosses $12 million in lost production. In response, the heavy-handed bosses evicted more than 12,000 workers from their homes. The now homeless strikers stayed with friends, in hotels, or in makeshift accommodations. Some took shelter at Buddhist and Shinto churches. Christian churches on the island opposed the strike, however, and turned away the homeless workers. The strike lasted nearly half a year, and despite the evictions, the overwhelming financial challenges, and a Spanish flu epidemic, the unified workers stood strong and won a 50% increase and better benefits. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. You've got a thought, question, comment, something on your mind. Quick shout out to the Kroger King Super Workers out in Denver, members of UFCW Local 7, some 8,000 essential frontline heroes, patriotic American workers who are on strike today. Really depressing and angering day today on this front, though. They've only been on strike a couple of days, and Kroger sought and won an injunction, restraining order against the members of UFCW Local 7, alleging that the strikers were threatening and blocking entrances. Well, I'm sorry, walking the picket line and calling and saying that the people who are crossing your line are scabs, that's part of striking. If you're going to cross somebody's picket line, if you're going to cross someone's line, be expected to have people not happy. Now, according to this restraining order, they're only going to be allowed to have 10 picketers per store, which I got to tell you, if you've got 8,000 members, I'm not sure how it was, like 70 stores, something like this. If you've got that many people, you should be able to man those picket lines with more than 10 people. And what's happening is we're seeing this happening again, where these companies, they don't negotiate in good faith. They're making wild amounts of profit. Their CEOs are lining their pockets like never before. I think the guy who's the CEO of Kroger makes like 900 times what the average worker makes. And you have this scenario where the court systems are so packed with anti-worker judges that you get these kind of restraining orders and these injunctions. You get this stuff happening. In fact, it's just now happening down in Brookwood, Alabama, with the Warrior Met coal workers who have been on strike for almost a year now. You got it over at Kellogg, you had it at John Deere, and now you've got it here, and you're going, this is not how this is supposed to go. This is government putting their thumb on the side of the employer heavily. And for me, the whole idea of allowing the strikers to be there is to cause the kind of friction that will bring the employer back to the table. Nobody wants a strike. Nobody wants to be in that situation. Those workers don't want to be out there. They don't want to be missing a day's pay. They don't want to be having to be confrontational with the people that they've had as their customers and built relationships with over the years. In fact, I think about my wife. My wife knows virtually all the checkout people at the grocery store. And she's got her favorites. We're going to go, I got to go see so-and-so. It's part of being part of a community, and the fact that they're going to limit that, I got a huge problem with it. It's infuriating, it's angering, but it's the world we now live in. Let's go to the phone lines. Got Alice on line one. Alice, how are you today?
Dazed and confused as usual. How are you?
The same. What's on your mind?
Couple of things. Number one, I am so sick and tired of hearing everything is Joe Biden's fault. The other night on the news, somebody was complaining about something, and then it happened 2 years ago, and it was supposed to be Biden's fault. And I thought, you people are idiots.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is, I was reading the WAPO today, and there was an article by that Henry Olson, and he was saying, Republicans are becoming the country's majority party. And I thought, really? I guess if you suppress all the voters and tell all these lies and try to kill everybody off with the COVID, that might do it.
Yeah, they're really trying. And look, I think Democrats are going to have a real hard time this midterm because they haven't gotten the things. They set the bar very high and they didn't achieve it. We want things that need to get done, and sadly, we've got Manchin and Sinema who are holding that up, and every Republican. This is where I come back to what Biden was talking about today. Show me where the Republican Party stands on any of these issues, other than just claiming everything's on fire.
Oh, I totally agree with you, and I am so sick of Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin. I have long said that they were both nothing more than Republicans in Democrat clothing, and they prove it more and more every day.
Yeah, Sinema's the curious one, because she was going to be the progressive darling. She was an activist in the streets. I mean, she's the curious one. Other than now, we find out she thinks this is her pathway to run for president in 24.
Yeah, she can keep dreaming, because I believe that, first off, most of us Democrats are going to go, forget it, Missy. And she's not crazy enough to win for the Republicans.
That's the perfect. See, that's the bumper sticker. I'm not crazy enough to be a Republican. Vote for me.
Exactly. All right, you have
Brilliant.
a good evening, Rick.
Thank you, Alice. I appreciate it. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425 if you've got a thought, question, comment, something on your mind. Yesterday, I talked about the Florida law that they're moving through to ensure that every sporting event in the state of Florida, every professional sporting event that receives government money must, without question, must play the national anthem at its home games. And I love the fact that someone did finally ask, is this a problem? Because I said yesterday, this is a solution in search of a problem. Because I have never been to a sporting event, ever. Whether it's the little kids playing basketball, where they bring out the tape recorder, or major sports, hockey, football, baseball, basketball, whatever. I have never been to one of them where they go, oh, darn it, we forgot to play the national anthem. Now, it did happen for a little bit when Mark Cuban in Texas refused to let the Dallas Mavericks play the national anthem before home games because of what was going on with the NBA and the whole kneeling thing, and that was his protest. So Texas went and passed a law saying you have to. Now Florida's doing it. And I said yesterday, get ready, because this is going to be the new outrage candy for this election cycle. They're trial ballooning it. We're going to find out, how many states come along, and lo and behold, don't I find out that Kentucky has done the same thing. Kentucky Representative Steve Sheldon of Bowling Green, the famed Bowling Green massacre site. He introduced House Bill 276, exact same thing. And I gotta wonder, and I'm trying to find the language, and I will find it, of each of the bills, because I want to know if they were written by the same person. Because when this outrage candy stuff comes out, when this outrage legislation goes, it's usually one person pushing it. It's usually one group, one moneyed group pushing this so that they can keep people angry. And I'm of the mindset that we should, absolutely, pass the law. Go ahead. In fact, I think we should go even more down the line. That if you, I don't know, call me strange, if you put a flag out in front of your house, you should know that there is a flag code. You should know there's a flag code, and you should know what it is. And you should know, in the middle of the night, if there's no light on it, that you better get out there with a flashlight or we're going to fine you. Because, well, that's the flag code. It says it has to be always lit. If it's out there in the rain, can't ever touch the ground, can't wear it as clothing. I'm kind of like, okay, if we're going to go hyper jingoist, if we're going to go, hyper patriot, why not pass a law that every time you pass a flag, you have to pledge allegiance? Let's go full on crazy. Not going to do that because they just need it, just enough of it to get their base who wear all the shirts and buy all the American flag shirts made in China and all of that. They need them to thump their chest and say they're better than everyone else and how they love the flag more than everything else. while ensuring that they tear down our democracy. This is the part that's really just, insane to me. That the people who claim to be the most patriotic, God-fearing, country-loving Americans are the ones on January 6th who are using that flag as a weapon. And we're okay by the treasonous Confederate flag marching through the halls of our capital. I'm sorry, I'm never going to forget that. That is never going away. And all of this jingoism aside, all of this stuff to get the base all bunched up and lathered up in the panties, I'm not going to change that. Again, what policies have Republicans come forth with that are going to help you put food on the table? What policies have they come forth with that are going to help rebuild our infrastructure, get education for our kids? Oh, no, I forgot. Education. Yes. Can't teach that theory that's critical about race. No. Our kids might actually know the real history of their country and, not do it again. But yet, you got people like the guy in Florida where they're trying to pass a law that you can't teach any history that makes people feel bad. Evidently, they think that if I learn what my ancestors did, somehow it's going to make me feel bad about myself. No, I don't feel bad about myself. I go, we should learn from history. Maybe not do it again. Maybe learn from it. Maybe understand the plight of others. I know. It's a lot. It's a lot to ask. Maybe make sure that our kids get health care. Ken Paxton's got COVID, Texas Attorney General. You know what Ken Paxton's got? He's got the best health care money can buy. He's going to get the Regenerons and he's going to get it all. They're going to, as Joe Rogan said, going to throw the kitchen sink at it. Whereas poor people in this country, they don't get the kitchen sink thrown at it medically. They just get hit with the kitchen sink. And this is the problem, the place that we're in right now. The needs of we, the working class, especially the working poor, never get addressed. Because we've got an elite class who rule this country. And they do it with a couple of senators. It's not hard to buy a couple of senators off, evidently. Heck, you got one from Kansas who's out hawking moron shirts because someone called him a moron. What bigger definition of moron is there than that? But hey, can't speak ill of the morons. And I can't help think of Dwight Eisenhower, who wrote a letter to his brother Edgar back in the mid-50s and said if anyone in our political history were to come out against labor unions or unemployment or Social Security or the Farm Bill or any of the New Deal programs that built the most prosperous working class in history, he said they'd never be heard from again in their political history. He said, however, there are a couple, Howard Hunt, a few Texas oil millionaires, but their numbers were negligible and they are stupid. Stupid has been running the Republican Party for quite some time, and now moronic seems to be taking over for stupid. And I don't like using those names, but I can't think of anything else to go. Peter Marshall is actually selling shirts with moron on it. This is a U.S. Senator. Do you know what he doesn't have? You know what Peter Marshall hasn't put forth? A way to make sure our kids get an education. There's no legislation. I've checked his site. He's got nothing. He's got no way to make sure people get health care. He's got no way to make sure that the problems that he and the Josh Hawleys of the world are thrilled over, that they get solved. He's not working with the Democrats to say, hey, how can we, if you think I think you're going too left, come and bring over here and I'll support it. There's none of that going on. None of it. And they're all protecting those people who attacked our Capitol on January 6th. And that's the part that's just incredibly infuriating. And now you look at the story today. Evidently, when they, remember I said that, I was surprised a little bit that there was no one caught with guns in the Capitol that day. And I said, the coordination and the leadership that it took to have those people not have guns, especially with a gun nut crowd like that, really took some coordination. There was organizing that went into making sure that they didn't have those. And that we then found out that there were caches of guns stored all over the place in Arlington and all around. We now find out that was a stockpile of them at a Comfort Inn nearby that had, drones and 30 days of supplies and guns and all kinds of stuff. Just ready to go, man. Ready to go. Drone with a 720p camera for recon. Yeah. But those are our God-fearing Americans. And now one of the Oath Keepers is running against Liz Cheney, trying to get her thrown out of the Republican Party out in Wyoming. And I love what she had to say. She said, if you look at the fact that you've had a number of Oath Keepers indicted by the Department of Justice for a range of charges, including seditious conspiracy, it's very clearly an organization that ought to be renounced, that ought to be rejected. And I agree. She goes on, I think it's concerning that the head of the state Republican Party of Wyoming is reportedly a member of that organization. And you know what? I think I got to tell you, if you got the member list, I think you'd be surprised at how many of the people in leadership are probably card-carrying members of that organization. We are in scary times. It is time to organize. It is time to come together. That simple. Sadly, I don't see much happening on the Biden agenda, and a lot of it has to do with Joe Manchin. And I look at the fact that Nick Saban, Jerry West, the legend Laker, and several other prominent West Virginia residents have come forth, and natives have come forth and signed a letter pushing Joe Manchin to support voting rights. I think it's kind of important that people step up. And if you're in West Virginia, call Joe Manchin. Say hi. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, Morris Pearl from the Patriotic Millionaires is going to be here to share some thoughts on the latest Oxfam report. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1909. That was the day Lewis Hine photographed child workers standing on spinning frames to mend threads and replace empty bobbins at the Bib Mill No. 1 in Macon, Georgia. It was just one example of the appalling use of children in industrial labor. Hine built his career on photographic portraits of young miners and mill workers, child cotton pickers, and factory workers. In 1908, he was hired by the National Child Labor Committee to document child laborers across the country. For the next 15 years, Hine would contribute over 5,000 photographs to the cause of ending child labor. Photo historian Dale Kaplan described the ways in which Hine captured these images, writing, Hine, the gentleman actor and mimic, assumed a variety of personas, including Bible salesman, postcard salesman, and industrial photographer, making a record of factory machinery to gain entry into the workplace. When unable to deflect his confrontations with management, he simply waited outside the canneries, mines, factories, farms, and sweatshops with his 50 pounds of photographic equipment and photographed children as they entered and exited the workplace. NCLC investigators referenced the photographs in reports on particular industries and locations. The NCLC also used the photographs to illustrate its own publications and succeeded in placing them in newspapers, progressive publications, and exhibits. One NCLC poster that featured Hine's portrait read, "Making human junk. Shall industry be allowed to put these costs on society?" By 1912, the NCLC persuaded Congress to create a United States Children's Bureau. The two organizations worked together to investigate abuses of child laborers. Years of legislative and judicial battles followed, until finally, in 1938, Congress passed the Fair Labor Standards Act.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we've talked about the Oxfam report this week. And again, my take on it is the same as it was on Monday when we talked with Bucknell economics professor Mateus Vernango. This is not a bombshell. It's not, we're not Magellan discovering new lands. This is all stuff we've known. It's the same report that it was the year before and the year before and the year before and the year before. Only this time, if there is something new, it's even worse than it's been before. So the newness, the bombshell, is that the pandemic, I don't even know it's a bombshell. It's virtually everything else. It's getting worse for poor people. Getting really good for the very wealthy. In fact, we're creating a billionaire. What was the statistic? A billionaire every couple of days, some nonsense like this. And yet we've got another, 160 million people who have fallen below the poverty line. So for every new billionaire we create, about another 6.1 million fall into poverty. I don't know, that's a good turnover. Every 26 hours, a billionaire is created. That was the number. I'm here to share some thoughts on this report. And if this is a bombshell, maybe I'm jaded. Maybe I've read so many of these that nothing is shocking anymore, but here to share some thoughts. I've asked Morris Pearl to come talk with us. Morris is the chairman of the Patriotic Millionaires, also the co-author of Tax the Rich, How Lies, Loopholes, and Lobbyists Make the Rich Even Richer. You can check out their work, patrioticmillionaires.org. Morris, thanks for taking time for us.
Great to be in your show, Rick.
So let's start right from the beginning. Is this a bombshell moment? Is this one of those moments we go, oh my gosh, I can't believe this? Or do you agree with me? It's the same old.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same problem we've been having. The rich are getting richer. Everyone else is getting farther and farther behind. As you said just a minute ago, behind me here, this is Park Avenue out my window. And plenty of us who can sit here and look at the numbers on our computer screens and own stock in Amazon and Apple are doing great. And, half a mile over there, there's people who used to work in restaurants and theaters who don't know how they're going to make their rent money for next month.
But Morris, what you're going to hear, and I'm sure you've already heard it as well, is that they're lazy people. Those poor people, they're just lazy. You just said it. There are jobs there. Those lazy poor people, they could be working.
I don't think they're lazy, Rick. I think that they're actually working 2 or 3 jobs. One might argue I'm the lazy one who's sitting here doing nothing and just living off of previous investments.
But, this is what we're told. This is what we're spoon-fed every day. If you're poor, it's your fault. And I look, I'm somebody who grew up poor. I didn't choose to be poor, but, I've been fortunate in my life to find jobs and to make smart decisions and to work hard to where I've done okay. But I still look back at the folks who are struggling, not with disdain, but in a way of how can we help? And, it's one thing, all of the stuff that we hear being thrown at us about, people who are poor, especially globally, I think is just mean a lot of times.
Look, you can think whatever you want about poor people, but there are a lot of them. And a lot of them did not have the opportunities that you and I and a lot of rich people had. Did not have the opportunity to have parents who could support them for months and years while starting a new business and not making any money. Did not have parents who could loan them tens of thousands of dollars to open a sandwich chain like, Senator Romney's friends did. A lot of people do not have the opportunities, do not have the good fortune that I had. And I don't want them to be indigent. I don't want them to live on the edge of nothing for their whole lives, because that's not the kind of city I want to live in. I want to live in a place with middle-class people who pay their rent on time every month, who pay their iPhone bills, who pay their electric bills, who go out and have a beer on Friday night, because that's the kind of place where people like me can invest money in businesses and make money and get even richer.
And that's always been the argument I've made, and yet we still hear the same kind of drumbeat of, no, the only way that we can have an economy that works, that we're going to lower inflation is if we cut taxes on folks like you so that you're going to then take that risk with that money that we've said you can have because we're not going to tax it. And you're the smart folks. You're going to do the right stuff with it. And somehow it will eventually rain down on us, pour down on us, trickle down. So it's supposed to get down to us one way or another.
Look, if you give me more money, the result of that will be I will have more money. That doesn't sound terribly complicated to me. That's how things work. But it's not like there's some other thing I might do if I have higher taxes. I mean, I suppose I could just put all my money in a desk drawer here, then I wouldn't have to pay any taxes and I'd make no return at all. But I would prefer to invest my money in stocks of companies that are doing well, pandemic or no pandemic, and make some return. And that's true whether I pay 2% tax and keep 98%, or pay 20% tax and keep 80%, or pay 50% tax and keep 50%. I'd rather keep half of something than have nothing at all. That seems logical to me.
It does, and yet again, policy-wise, we just can't seem to get to a place where we're dealing with our societal problems. And in this report, again, the same prescription it had for last year and the year before. We need sane, rational tax codes. We need to invest in education. We need to invest in healthcare. We need to make massive investments in helping folks at the bottom. And none of this is new, Morris. I mean, this is probably, if you were on last year to talk about this, and I think you probably even were, this is probably what we were talking about.
Yeah, I did talk about this last year. I think the problem is that some of our political leaders, like the former president, for instance, the most recent former president, what he does is he tells the poor people, don't worry about the rich people who are getting all the money. What you have to worry about is the even poorer people who the Democrats are trying to help catch up with you. Because then if they help those really poor people, then you'll be tied for the bottom because you'll be just as poor as them. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to make class warfare between the really poor and the very poor. And trying to distract them so they won't think about the billionaires who are getting virtually all of the money anyway.
And this report kind of lays that out. I mean, what was it? The top 10 guys doubled their wealth, and they were all white guys, I believe. The top 10 of them doubled their wealth over the pandemic. And the amount of money, and I've talked about this before, the amount of money that has gone to our billionaire class throughout the pandemic has just been obscene, especially as you're talking about the fact that, January 15th of this year, that $250 that was going to every family that had a child then disappeared. And the fact that we were able to cut childhood poverty in half, well, I guess that's over now. We're going back to the kids going to bed hungry.
I mean, we have to make a decision as a nation. Is the middle class supposed to be worried about the very poor catching up with them and trying to keep ahead? Or is the middle class supposed to be worried about the billionaires and the very rich investors who are getting virtually all of the money? And that's the decision we're making as a nation. And we have roughly half the people on each side. Half of the people in our country are more worried about the even poorer people catching up with them and them not being able to get ahead than they are about the investors and hedge fund managers and billionaires who are getting really, really, really rich.
Yeah, but here's the weird thing. I mean, we're in a political moment where obviously nothing can get done. You've got the Republican Party who says that they're the party of family values. They love the children, Morris. And you got Democrats who the vast majority of them want to pass something, especially on the child tax credit front, which,
how about they start loving the children who are here living in our country with us, as opposed to the ones who have not yet been born.
No, I agree with that, but I'm getting to this moment where I'm going, look, I'm not a rich guy by any stretch of the imagination. You and I are not in the same zip code, but $250 a month is not an enormous sum of money, and the fact that through this pandemic we saw childhood poverty cut in half by what I view a very small amount of money, but for some completely life-changing, and we can't move that one single policy along. It seems like everything else then is completely broken if we can't even do just that.
I was having dinner with a United States senator who was running for president, who wanted to run for president at least. Because the thing is, if we help people, then all the taxpayers in my state will complain and say, oh, I didn't get any help. I survived by myself. I don't want to help people who are whatever. And that's the attitude that we have to somehow fight against. We shouldn't be worried about somebody wanting to help the people who are even worse off.
Which is why I go back to, I've always been against the idea of welfare handout programs. Even when I was a kid growing up in the projects, having to go to the grocery store with that clown money food stamps and being humiliated for using them, I remember going, this is just a screwy way of having to have a system like this. I've always been in the mindset of A. Philip Randolph and the idea of we don't want handouts, we want jobs. And this is where the federal government or the state government or some public sector entity should be the employer of last resort. And we organize those and we make those living wage jobs so people have the dignity of work, but also we can subsidize that work and make sure that everyone makes at least above the poverty line wages. That's always been my view.
We can subsidize living wage jobs. We can do that. They did that in the 1930s. That helped our grandparents. And they can do that again today. That kind of thing works. Dignity of work is very important. That's what people really want, is dignity. That's actually more important than money for a lot of people.
No, I don't disagree. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Morris Pearl. Morris is the chair of the Patriotic Millionaires. Patrioticmillionaires.org is their website. He's also co-author of Tax the Rich, How Lies, Loopholes, and Lobbyists Make the Rich Even Richer. Now, I look at this Oxfam report, and in the title, it's clear, inequality kills. And I don't think that most people realize just how deadly being poor is and how costly. And I think the pandemic did highlight that. Folks who are in the higher poverty range, in the higher poverty demographics, are dying at a much higher rate from not just COVID, but other things than folks in higher socioeconomic spaces. This, again, is one of those things where I'm a believer in. We need to have some kind of national health care, some kind of balancing, if you will. And I'm curious your thoughts.
I don't think it's a big secret. It's a lot better to be rich. I suggest that everyone try it. I'm the head of a group called the Patriotic Millionaires. We think everybody should be a billionaire. It's way better than being poor, believe me. And we want to help people do that. We want to make a nation of middle-class people who can all save for their retirement, save for their kids' education, have enough money to get by. That's the kind of country that I want to live in.
So what's the answer here then, Morris? I mean, you wrote the book. Obviously, having a higher tax rate on very wealthy people is part of it. In this Oxfam report, they're saying that you could have taken 99% of what the billionaire class, or just the top 10, actually, you could take 99% of what they've got. You could solve all these problems and still give them billions of dollars, and we'd be better off. Now, we both know that's never going to happen. So what is the way forward?
Well, part of the way forward is to charge people at the top the same tax rates that people like you pay every single week when money's deducted from your paycheck. Part of the answer is to pay people living wage when they're working. People who are working full-time should make enough money to support themselves. That doesn't seem like a radical concept. And another part is political power. We should not have these systems where the vast majority of the people in the country want something, and the senators representing a small minority of the people are able to hold that up because of whatever the crazy rules are. No. So we need to change things in our country, and those are some of the answers. I mean, there's a lot of answers, but those are the three pieces that I'm working on.
Yeah, but again, we're in this weird spot where we've got a couple of senators not willing to move. And it comes back to us, though, I believe. And I blame, I guess it's growing up, poor and Catholic, where I internalize everything and everything's my fault. But I think it's our fault for the people that we choose and how easily we're divided, especially on poverty issues.
I live in New York. My senators are doing all right. In Pennsylvania, where you are, one of your senators is on board. So, you can't blame everybody. There are some people who are doing, 100% of what they can do. Yeah. And the problem is they only have 48 of 100 on their side. And I don't know what to do about that. You can't win an election with 48% of the votes in a body of 100.
No, this is where I keep coming back to. It's our fault for who we vote for, especially here in Pennsylvania with someone like Pat Toomey, who I see as someone standing in the way on a lot of this stuff. And look, the Republicans who keep telling us that they're the party of family values, all of this stuff. Yet when it comes to actual family values, I guess their family matters.
I don't know. You won't see Joe Manchin voting for anything that damages the values of his family, who has their value invested in the coal mining industry. But I think it depends on what family values you mean. Yeah. You mean the value of having a dignity of work and being able to support your family financially? Or do you mean the value of, blind loyalty to a leader figure? That's some people's value. And
anything in this report, anything in this Oxfam report, Inequality Kills, that you find hopeful, that any policy you see that they're pushing, anything you took from this that's a positive? Because look, I look at it all going, oh my God, it's worse, it's getting worse. There's no hope in it. Is there any hope in this?
Look, Rick, it's easy to get discouraged, but think about where we are now compared with where we were, say, 5 years ago.
Yeah,
we are better off today than we were 5 years ago. We now have the President of the United States, who's maybe not completely winning, but at least on our side. The chairman of the Senate Finance Committee is on our side. The bills we're talking about have passed at least one House of Congress. So we're not winning yet. We haven't won. I'm not, counting our chickens, but I am saying we have made progress. And I'd like to be optimistic and look forward to continuing to make progress and eventually winning.
There you go. Morris, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff, my friend.
Thank you, Rick. Great to be in your show.
As always, our good friend Morris Pearl. Make sure you check out their work over at patrioticmillionaires.org. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. Where working people come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Have you ever worn a union button or T-shirt to work? On this day in labor history, the year was 1912. Members of the Australian Tramways Association in Brisbane, Queensland, decided to put on their union badges at work. The men operated and maintained the city's public transport system. For months before the action, their manager, an American named Joseph Stillman Badger, had banned wearing the badges. He wanted to thwart the union from growing in numbers. Before noon that day, the workers gathered together and donned their union badges by affixing them to their watch chains. And for that, they were promptly suspended from their jobs. They were told they could return to work if they took off the badges. The workers refused. That night, 10,000 people gathered in the city's market square in a rally to support the workers. The next day, 25,000 workers walked off the job and marched through the streets. A general strike was called for January 30th. 43 unions supported the strike. The police violently attempted to disband the strikers on February 2nd, a day known in Australia as Black Friday. Perhaps the most remembered event in the strike occurred when the famous feminist Emma Miller stuck her hat pin into the rump of the police chief's horse. The horse reared and sent him tumbling to the ground. The strike wore on for 5 weeks before it faded. At the end of February, the tramway employees were officially granted the right to wear their badges. But the company refused to hire back striking workers. The events at Brisbane were an important stand for free speech and the right to form a union. A question for today is, how far would you be willing to go to show your union pride? Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So back in 2013, we here at the big program, we traveled across the country, 9,800 miles in 28 days in search of labor's history. We went, down to Tennessee, all the way out to San Jose, up to Longview, Washington, all the way across through Wyoming and Denver. And we hit every place that you could imagine that there would be history of working people. And one of the things we found, well, a lot of it's been eviscerated. Corporate America has done a very nice job of whitewashing what we have left and doing away with what was once there. And perfect example was Blair Mountain in West Virginia. We went there, and at the time, they were literally trying to take the mountain away. They'd already taken the town, all the buildings, all the bricks, everything. You could never tell that there was a strike of 10,000 miners who fired more than 1 million shots in that labor war. You could never tell they were there. Look, you got dropped in the forest. And they wanted to take the mountain away. This is what corporate America does. And one of the places we ended up was Toledo, Ohio, when the electric auto light strike happened back in 1934. One of, I think, the least talked about, especially from the historical point of view, but in my view, one of the most important strikes in our nation's history. And here to share a little bit of thought, a little bit of history, and a little bit of background on it, I've asked Therese Pollack to come talk with us. Kelly is the producer and host of Unsung History Podcast, their website, unsunghistorypodcast.com. Kelly, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick. Always a pleasure.
So I was so happy to see that you guys had chosen the auto light strike as a topic, especially now, given what's going on down in Brookwood, Alabama. What's happening to those Met Warrior coal workers who are being injunctioned off the picket line. I was calling for, they threw the people off the picket line. Let's do like those folks in Toledo did and get everybody in the community to surround the place and shut things down. Because look, we've done this stuff in the past. Can do it again. And I think things like your podcast maybe help educate us and plant a kernel of thought in our heads.
Yeah, I think the Toledo auto light strike is just, it's fascinating. And it's all these, the kind of things I like to dig into are like the why didn't I know that kind of stories. And I grew up in Ohio and I didn't know about the Toledo auto light strike until I started looking for these sort of buried pieces of history.
Yeah, we went there back in 2013 and had a fabulous tour. Professor Timothy Musser-Cruz from Bowling Green University took us around. He basically wrote the book on the area and the banking industry and how all of this stuff intertwined and took us to the memorial site there in Toledo where they've got some sculptures and an archway. But again, I come back to we don't teach this history in school. And, you got people who are insane over, we're worried about someone might teach a theory about something that we don't understand that may be critical. But the stuff that we should also be learning is what happened to our ancestors and the working people of this country. So walk me through. I'm going to give you the expert hat here. Walk me through how the auto light strike, how it began, and what was the big push.
Yeah, so I mean, the fascinating thing about this strike is that it happens during the Depression, right? So we've got lots of unemployed people. You wouldn't think this would be a time for labor militant people for this to happen. So what happens is in 1933, there's the National Recovery Act, or the National Industrial Recovery Act, which leads to more labor organizing. The AFL starts to say, okay, we should include auto workers in our organizing, which they hadn't been doing before that point. Start to organize in Detroit, get 30,000 people signed up. And then the Toledo electric auto light company, they don't make cars, but they make parts for cars. And about a dozen workers there in 1934, in February of 1934, say, okay, we're going to strike. Now we finally organized. We're part of the AFL, and we're going to strike. And they walk out and it's like 5 days long because there's only 12 of them. There's lots of unemployed people that the company could hire. And the company says, we'll sign a deal with you. We'll get you a new contract April 1st. We'll get you a new contract April 1st. So they go back to work, and that could have been the end of it. But April 1st comes, and of course, management has not provided a new contract, as you might expect. And so at this point, they get more than a dozen people. They get a larger group, a couple hundred, to walk out and say, okay, we're really going on strike. It probably still wouldn't have succeeded. But what happens is that the Unemployed League, which is part of the, I'm going to get the name wrong, but it's the Socialist American Workers' Party. So the Unemployed League is affiliated with them, and they get a hold of this and say, okay, we're going to support this. And they get, eventually, over the course of a couple months, they get 10,000 people out every day picketing. There's an injunction that says you can't have more than 25 people picketing in front of each entrance. They say, just ignore it. We're going to just picket anyway.
You can't arrest all 10,000 of us.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that I think is one of the real lessons from something like this is you can't do this alone. I mean, you know this, but you need a whole community in this. You need the support. And so without the Unemployed League supporting them, without these 10,000 people showing up, it would have just been swept aside like a million other strikes had been.
Right. And for me, the lessons of that strike and that era really is that there were people who were involved in organizing in all different places. You had the American Workers' Party. You had the federal labor unions, the FLUs. You had the AFL doing its skilled craft organizing. You had all of these different pockets of organizing, and eventually finding themselves in the common ground of being a worker. And this is what I've been talking about for a long time, because we're splintering ourselves up on whatever identity we have today, and pick whatever subdivision you want. And we're doing organizing in all of those places. But the one place that we all are in is we're all workers, and we should all be supporting each other. And for me, the lesson of the auto light strike is that there was organizing going on in every different direction. There were groups doing this, that, and the other thing. And eventually they said, economics, we're going to agree on. We're going to fight for better wages, hours, conditions for these workers, because we know that eventually it's going to help all of us, and we're going to all do better. And it was an education process that hasn't been done yet today, in my view. I know I've rambled a bit, but I'm curious your thoughts then.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, because the real legacy of the auto light strike isn't what those workers got. Eventually they get into a scuffle, there's tear gas, and then the National Guard is called in. If you know anything about the history of Ohio and the National Guard, that's a bad sign. A couple of people are killed, a bunch of people are injured, and the strike eventually ends because Roosevelt says, hey, we got to get involved, and brings people in to solve the crisis. But what these workers got, and they got more or less what they were asking for. They got a raise, they got recognition of the union. But that's not the story. The story is that it was a strike like this one and two others that happened the same year in Minnesota and in San Francisco that made the Roosevelt administration sort of sit up and go, oh, wait, this is happening everywhere. All of these workers are involved. We need to figure out some structural changes that will solve this problem.
We need industrial
and that's
peace.
Where the Wagner Act.
That's where the NLRA comes in, exactly. And I have a lot of people say, well, the NLRA wasn't perfect. And I go, no, it wasn't. It was a peace treaty more than anything, because literally working people had enough of being just making enough to not starve today. And working hard for that and not seeing any benefits, and then being pitted against the unemployed. When we were on our tour, we went to places in Kansas City where they had an auto plant, and the place leaves my head right now. But the guy, took us to a window. And he said, look out the window there where this beautiful lush park is with swings and playgrounds and all this stuff. And he goes, now imagine 1,000 men standing there waiting for you to get fired so they can come in and take your job. That's the kind of power that employers had. He said, now imagine organizing those people to understand that both of you have the same thoughts in mind and are on the same level. And he said, that's the challenge. And it's a challenge that we face today, Kelly.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And you're totally right that people are sort of pitting types of workers against each other. If management can get us to all fight against each other, then, that goes a long way toward solving their problems. And I think you see this a lot in things like when people are talking about the essential workers in the pandemic, and so there's like the essential workers, and then there's other people who are, maybe non-essential workers working from home, and they see each other as sort of at odds, or, who's getting the rights to do certain things. But if they see each other all as workers, if they think of each other as a common community and support each other, you can get so much more.
No, absolutely. And I argue everyone's an essential worker because that job is essential to every worker. At the end of the day, you still need to support your family, keep a roof over your kids' head, food on the table, clothes on their back. And how do we do that? How do we in the working class do that? We do that through the time that we give up in labor for the money that we get to take care of our families. And this, again, I keep coming back to the moment. We're seeing the Great Resignation. We're seeing a large number of strikes that are going on. All of this stuff, I'm frustrated that I don't see the kind of organizing that I want to think happened back in this era. Now, clearly, neither of us were around back then, but both of us have probably read more than the vast majority of people in the country. I want to see that kind of organizing, that kind of commitment, that kind of we're going to fight for a better future for our kids, more economic justice, and then in my view, all of the other stuff come with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, you mentioned that the Wagner Act wasn't perfect, and of course it wasn't, but I think it helped tremendously that there was an administration at the time who was supportive of workers. They may not have solved all the problems, they were doing a peace treaty, but when they saw a strike going on, that could have gone really badly, right? They could have just sent in lots more National Guard and said, just stay here, camp out, and that's not what happened. And so I think that it's sort of both a bottom-up and a top-down thing that can really support that and say, okay, we're gonna come together, we're gonna educate, we're gonna band together.
Absolutely, but here's the thing. I mean, if you have that kind of groundswell organizing where you're doing this and you see which side you're on and which side you're not on, the political side comes along as well. I mean, if you have people who are and I make this argument all the time. I think union members are more politically active than non-union members because they're used to being empowered, they're used to having a say, and they're used to being willing to stand up and say, I'm not taking this you-know-what anymore. We're going to change things. And this is where I think that kind of grassroots organizing and that kind of empowerment could be a good thing in this moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it can be used for all sorts of things, but especially in this moment, seeing the rights of workers. And I think with the Great Resignation, with so many people realizing what is really missing in a social safety net for workers right now, it's a good moment to capitalize on that, but it takes people organizing them. It takes people capitalizing on that and bringing them together and educating them. And that's it's certainly more what you're doing than what I'm able to do on a podcast where I'm looking at lots of different kinds of history. But I think it's important for all of us to be telling these stories, because if you aren't paying attention to these stories from the past, if you don't realize that they even existed, that they ever happened, it's hard to sort of see where you can build on something and bring it back.
No, that's an excellent point. You're listening to the
I
Rick
did
Smith
another
Show.
episode. Oh. Sorry, I was just going to say I did another episode a while back on the Coors boycott, which is another interesting, very sort of untold story that I think is so important for
the one that I'm still on.
Understand.
So
yeah,
that. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Kelly Therese Pollack. She's the producer and host of Unsung History Podcast. You can check out their website, unsunghistorypodcast.com. So as someone who just like you said, you grew up in Ohio, you didn't know about it. What drew you to it first, and then what did what sticks with you? I mean, I think of certain things, I went to Blair Mountain, for instance, and the fact that, that's where the term redneck came from. There were a million shots. Those are things that stick with me. What stuck with you from this story?
Yeah, what really stuck with me is the community that, both it was the Unemployed League coming to help, but then it was just also the people in Toledo who could have been strike breakers, who could have gone in and tried to take these jobs and instead said, no, we're going to stand. We're going to have solidarity here and help these workers. So I think for me, that's really the biggest story. And then, when the National Guard comes in, it's a bunch of kids. It's a bunch of like high schoolers, college kids who are in the National Guard and are coming in, and the community isn't with the National Guard. The community isn't with the cops who are trying to break things up. The community is really with the workers who are striking. And so that's the thing that I think just sort of really stays with me.
Yeah, you struggle with bringing out the big guns, and the story of how they mounted a machine gun on a bridge because they were going to shoot down people if they got out of hand. And you think about that as a worker in a community, that they're literally willing to put a machine gun on a bridge to mow down your neighbors. I think that puts a little something in the pit of your stomach, and I think it helps you decide which side of the equation you're on.
Yeah, I think so too. And, when I did this episode, I talked to Dr. Bradley Summer, who's a labor historian, and he was talking about how members of the community actually let them take bricks, let the workers take bricks out of their porches and stuff to, throw at the National Guard and the deputies. And, that really is just sort of the spirit of, we're all in this together. What do you need from me? And yeah.
There's nothing that says solidarity like
story.
There's nothing that says solidarity like tear down my foundation to throw at those cops.
Right. Yeah.
No, but I mean, I understand we have to put ourselves in that moment. The Depression was what it was, in the fact that they were demanding their government do something to help, and the only response you see from a government agency is to send troops to put down the thing that you think is going to help support your family. And they didn't ask for a lot. If I remember right, they only asked for about a 10% raise. After the fact, they had cut their wages by almost half because of the Depression. So there's just so much to this. And I hope folks will check out unsunghistorypodcast.com. Check out Kelly Pollack's podcast. I think it's fantastic. Kelly, I appreciate you taking some time for us.
Yeah, thanks, Rick.
Good stuff. Kelly Pollack, unsunghistorypodcast.com. Make sure you take a look at that. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you missed any of today's program, make sure that you check out the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. You've got any friends you want to share with, by all means do that. Any of your MAGA hat wearing friends, absolutely there as well. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. Follow us on social media and Twitter at Rick Smith Show, YouTube, Facebook, all of that. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we've talked about the Oxfam report this week. And again, my take on it is the same as it was on Monday when we talked with Bucknell economics professor Mateus Vernango. This is not a bombshell. It's not, we're not Magellan discovering new lands. This is all stuff we've known. It's the same report that it was the year before and the year before and the year before and the year before. Only this time, if there is something new, it's even worse than it's been before. So the newness, the bombshell, is that the pandemic, I don't even know it's a bombshell. It's virtually everything else. It's getting worse for poor people. Getting really good for the very wealthy. In fact, we're creating a billionaire. What was the statistic? A billionaire every couple of days, some nonsense like this. And yet we've got another, 160 million people who have fallen below the poverty line. So for every new billionaire we create, about another 6.1 million fall into poverty. I don't know. That's a good turnover. Every 26 hours, a billionaire is created. That was the number. I'm here to share some thoughts on this report. And if this is a bombshell, maybe I'm jaded. Maybe I've read so many of these that nothing is shocking anymore, but here to share some thoughts. I've asked Morris Pearl to come talk with us. Morris is the chairman of the Patriotic Millionaires, also the co-author of Tax the Rich, How Lies, Loopholes, and Lobbyists Make the Rich Even Richer. You can check out their work, patrioticmillionaires.org.